Hi, this is the Drupal usability meeting for October 30th, 2018. And we are going to return to an interesting issue first, 299.1207. Drupal core should inform the user of the security coverage for the site's installed minor version. Who wants to take this?
I guess I will, and Ted, feel free to pipe in. And let me share my screen. Okay, yeah, that's the right one. So this issue updates the update module to provide an additional message pointing out that a given minor version of Drupal will eventually lose security coverage, generally 6 months after the next minor release of Drupal. And this is a point that's often missed by a lot of site owners. So it's good that we warn them of this. And I guess I made these screenshots when Drupal 8.6.0 had just come out. And so with the patch, if I have Drupal 8.6.0 installed, I have this first notice that current minor version is supported. It will receive security fixes until the release of 8.8, and a link to the release cycle overview. So that's all good. The update module already has a notice on the page that simply says up to date for the Drupal core update status. If I had been on the previous minor on 8.5.7, then I would get this warning message saying that it's supported. And it will receive security fixes until 8.7 is released, but to continue getting security coverage, we should upgrade to 8.6 or higher. And if I'm on an unsupported minor version, then it adds this error message that the minor version I'm on is unsupported and won't receive security updates. So that's all working pretty well. I think there are some minor changes we might want to make to it, but until I made these screenshots, I don't think anyone had reviewed this issue looking at both the new message being added and the existing message already added by the update module. And they're looking at the two together. There are a few things I don't like. For instance, there's a lot of duplicated information. And in particular, this link, update to 8.6 or higher soon, goes to the same place as the available updates link. And I suggested some changes to avoid that duplication. And I think in the long term, we'd really like to combine the two messages into one so that we don't have any duplicated information. And I guess the first question is whether people agree that there's too much duplicated information. And then if you do agree, then the question is this bad enough that we should block this issue on it, or can we deal with it in a follow-up issue? Ted, do you want to say anything about it, since you're the one who did most of the work on this patch?
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look at it since you told me about the other day. So the one with the key Drupal core update status, that is not being touched in this issue, is that right?
I think that's right.
It's just the Drupal core security coverage row that we're affecting.
Right, but my point is that that's that notice or warning or error, that message is provided by the same module. It's provided by the
Yeah,
update
yeah.
module.
I just reminded myself.
And there's a lot of overlap between the information we're adding and the information already in that message.
I mean, do you think, I mean, looking at it now, after not looking at it for a while, like for a user, what is the difference between Drupal core security coverage and Drupal core update status? I mean, I guess one's like you're out of date, but it's not a security issue. Another one is telling you about like if you're going to receive updates. So I see. Okay.
Yeah, the new message that we're adding specifically points out whether the current minor version is getting security updates and how long it will continue to receive security updates. Whereas the existing message doesn't distinguish between security updates and other updates, just says, oh, there's a new version, you should upgrade.
Mm-hmm. Was your suggestion to change the Drupal core update status one at all, or just to change the Drupal core security coverage one that we are adding?
So in the long run, I'd like to combine the two messages,
yeah,
because they're sort of there's a lot of duplicated information. In particular, the link where to go to is duplicated, even though it has different link text. So I suggested that as a short-term fix, we might change the text in the new one we're adding so that it uses the same link text, available updates. So change that middle line, and instead of making update to 8.6 or higher soon, instead of making that a link, make that plain text, and then add a second sentence using the same link text as the other message. So at least there's consistency between the links. And then perhaps having a follow-up issue that would do sort of a more complete overhaul of combining these two into a single message.
Yeah, I think I would favor the follow-up, because I'm looking back at this issue and I don't remember exactly right now, but I think like these messages could be emailed. So I think for existing messages, we probably want to be really, really, really conservative about changing existing messages, because I don't think it's inconceivable that somebody could have an email filter looking for these particular messages. So for our new one, I was going to say for our new one, that gives us more leeway, because nobody obviously has a filter on our new one. But then it also means that if we commit this one, then it would become immediately, well, I guess as long as it's not before it, I don't know if this is going to receive that. I guess if it's backported, then we're kind of immediately in the same situation where, since these messages are sent in emails, what's our freedom to change them?
You're sounding a little fuzzy. Is that just me?
Sorry, what was that?
You're sounding kind of fuzzy.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to switch my mic. Sorry.
That's better already.
Okay, I moved my mic. Yeah, I don't know if that's true about if anybody has thoughts about the emails, because I think there's a part where these same messages get sent out in emails, or there's an option to have them sent out in emails. So if you were a site owner and you wanted to filter to say, okay, let me know when there's an available update, you might actually be filtering on specific text that we have in our current messages. So I don't know if our policy in the past has been to be very careful about changing those, because we're sending them an email and they're security related. So if you change the exact text, then presumably somebody's email filter that they're relying on to let them know that there's a Drupal core update for a particular site is not going to work anymore. Or am I being paranoid?
Well, paranoia is good, but I do think it's paranoid to imagine that someone has an email filter based on the body text of the email.
Okay.
Certainly, an email filter based on the subject line is reasonable.
Okay. All right. Well, but yeah, I guess I would be interested to see, like, is the subject line different based on, I guess, is the subject line what we're seeing there, out of date version 8.6 available? Or is the subject line more something of like update status, or I don't know. I guess I would want to be sure that in the subject line, it actually tells you the status versus just telling you here's the status email. Because if it didn't tell you the status, then the only way you could filter it based on whether there was an update would be to look at the body of the email. But we can figure that out. Obviously, that's something we can know. But yeah, I like your point about the duplicated text.
So does anyone else have any opinion? Am I being am I giving too much weight to the fact that two different links to this same page have different text, or do you agree that that's a UX issue?
I think it's confusing. I'm just trying to understand it a little. Like, it seems like a mistake. It's repeated twice. Like, if you don't read the fine print. But I'm not sure what to suggest as a resolution, you know, to sort it out. I'm kind of looking at it locally. I'm trying to kind of sift through it and see what's going on.
So just to be clear, Benji, in this case, the update to 8.6 hire soon on the top row is the same link as the available updates page.
That's
on
right.
The second row.
These two links go to the same page, and that's what I think is most confusing. And I guess down here in a comment from last month, I made some minimal suggestions. First of all, use security fixes or security updates consistently. So let's go back and look at that. I see security fixes here in the warning message, security fixes. And
the security update.
Down here in the error message, I see security updates and security fixes. So anyway,
like security updates sound like the better term.
I agree.
Yeah.
And then make that text plain text, and there's something similar in the error message, and add a second sentence, see the available updates page for more information. So that would be exactly repeating the last sentence of the current message. So it would increase duplication, but it would at least be consistent. And then we'd have a follow-up issue to combine the two messages and remove the duplication.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, because then somebody, if they're looking at that and be like, well, I want to look at both of these messages where they send me to, click one, you look at it, you go back, click to the other one. Maybe you don't look at the page to know that these are actually the same page.
Exactly.
Maybe look for a difference. So yeah, okay, that makes sense. I should be able to get to that in the next couple of days, I think.
So in my latest comment, I added a couple of things about code review, but for this meeting, we're just talking about UX review. So do people agree with that direction, that we temporarily increase the duplication, but also increase consistency and have a follow-up issue to remove the duplication?
I do.
No one else has an opinion?
I think it's fine. I'm trying to pin down the exact scenario where you get the duplicate messages. Is like, I lost track of that. That's an older version that's not has a security release. That's not supported.
Right. So if you're on the current minor, there's not really any duplication. The old message just says up to date. Well, I wonder what that is a link to. If you're one version behind, you get the 2 warning messages. If you're 2 versions or more behind, you get the 2 error messages.
The 2, okay. Oh, okay. I mean, making the text more consistent makes sense to me. I mean, it's not too troubling now that I'm seeing it, because I'm playing with the version number locally and seeing the different effects. And,
right. So you agree with the plan of being more consistent, but also more duplicative in the short run for this issue, and then having a follow-up issue. Also, one reason to postpone it to a follow-up issue is that the code for the existing message is already really, really complicated and desperately needs to be cleaned up. But that sort of makes it a much bigger issue, and I think we'd really like to get the current issue in. And there are already follow-up issues, like, you know, currently if we were to release Drupal 8.5.7 and 8.5.8 and then release Drupal 9.0, then people on 8.5.7 would be getting messages eventually telling them to upgrade to 8.5.9, which will never be. So there's already a follow-up issue to make that work with the major release of Drupal 9. But it would be nice to get this one in sooner rather than later.
Yep, I just agree. I mean, a follow-up issue on the editorial makes total sense. It just needs to be very simple, very blunt. What's the problem? But right now it serves the purpose. It tells people exactly. It does tell people what's going on.
Right. And I think what we've said before talking about this issue is that it says what the status is, what the recommended action is, and depending on whether it's a notice or a warning or an error, that conveys the urgency of that recommended action. So I think it works pretty well, and I just want to avoid some confusion. So shall we declare this finished for this meeting?
Sure.
And Ted will follow up, and I will promise to find time. If Ted can find time to update the patch, I'll find time to review it. And I'll also do some code review in addition to the UX review.
Thanks.
Okay, so switching tabs. This. Yeah, so the new thing on the issue we've been talking about is that Jacob has already gone ahead and implemented the proposed design on the web form module. And he's published a change record for the web form module that includes screenshots. So here it is. This is not a highly destructive message. This is deleting. Oh, yes, it is. So highly destructive includes the checkbox and is called out as a warning message. And that's just the first of many screenshots on this issue. Using a details element when there's a list that might be very long.
Yeah, I mean, I can address it. So, yeah, it's a shame these screenshots are doing dialogue, so that doesn't really address the issue we're talking about because web form uses a lot of modals. This would open up in a, for core, this is going to open up in a page. And I mean, the things I kind of realized was the title needs to say the action, the entity, and the entity type, or that was my conclusion. So like for the web form, for a web form, it would say, or let's just use a node, for example, delete my node, and then it would say node, content type. Or is it content that we use for nodes when we delete it? I forget what we call the alas, an issue. I think it's content. So delete my homepage content. What I did realize was you still need to, like, we're trying to get that are you sure? Yeah, we're trying to get that are you. I'm kind of for getting that are you sure out of the title. This does not work for mobile really well. It's like it's like too verbose of a title and too much going on. And I feel like putting that in a warning still emphasizes, it puts enough emphasis on making someone confirm it. This action can't be undone, I think, is good text. And that's kind of led me to also then start listing out what's the action going to do? Because we've talked about that with highly, and I feel like with anything that's being deleted in Drupal, it's worth pushing people to say what's going to happen. Even if it's like remove the node, it's also going to remove relationships. And you may as well just be as blunt as, direct and straightforward as possible with any change. It pushes people to think about it when they're setting up these delete confirmations. Benji, you talked about shortening the title, and I experimented with it, and I kind of decided, I think for this UI, it's getting the title, the delete, the debug being the title just needs to be in single quotes. And that actually, because we can't use the emphasis tag in modals, helps. But if we want titles to be unique, I think in Drupal, when we're trying to delete something, but we want it to be as short as possible. So that's about it. I mean, in implementing this, it's not that hard if we give good editorial guidelines for people to go through core and tweak these things. Because it's really just it's moving a few things around. It's moving simplifying the question and moving it into a Drupal status message.
Just looking at the screenshot that's up there now,
Mm-hmm.
I thought we had talked about the 3 levels, notice, warning, error. Warning applies to something highly destructive, and whenever we have a warning message, we should also have the checkbox to confirm. But this doesn't follow that pattern.
It doesn't. I wanted to just implement the pattern. If we decide to tweak it, it's very easy for me to go in iteratively and fix it. The only thing that threw me off about, like, I feel like it's always a warning because it always says this can't be undone. I think in Drupal, every single action has that at this point. I mean, I'm open to implement. We don't have one other problem is we don't want a green message, and core does not support an info message, which is usually blue. Like the 7 theme doesn't have a styling for the info message.
Huh.
It used to. I think that's gone away. It's like a gray box now. So no icon. I'd have to see if there's a core issue related to it. Other themes do support that. Like Bootstrap has that supported. When I say info, it's like a blue message. Green meaning good, blue meaning eh, and yellow meaning here's a warning, and red's the error. I mean, I think we should move past this and kind of focus on the main issue on what's the content that we're trying to structure correct? What's the look and feel in terms of, you know, the messaging? If we want this action will be bulleted lists. I do think the details helps a lot when there's a lot of extra meta information, like what configuration is being deleted. I don't think we should show that initially. It should be a collapsed details. Basically, it kind of the way I'm looking at it is this action will delete some configuration, and then you have a details element that lets someone look at all the configuration. But most people could care less about the configuration being deleted. That's it for me.
So I haven't seen this issue before, but I mean, the one spot that I see this in is in core is when you delete a content type. It has like configuration deletions and a list. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to do something similar to that, or?
We're trying to warn people when it's highly destructive and show, like in core there. So there are, like in core, there's two base classes. It's like content entity delete and config entity delete, and config entity delete does kind of show all the config. Yeah, this is where it should be a red box, okay, where you can't delete it.
Okay.
On this side, I don't have this issue to, you know, I didn't have any issues like this, but it needs to kind of say, well, it shouldn't say, are you sure? It says, you know, can't delete article content type. Mm-hmm. With the, you know.
Yeah, in that situation where you can't do it even after confirmation, we discussed making it an error message rather than a warning.
Yeah, I think having messages helps a lot, but then it's what else do you say around the message? I think just showing a big, like putting this whole string of text in a red box is okay, but it's better to use those messages to call out the most important thing, and then the secondary information would fall below it. Like, how would you remedy the error message should fall below the error message? Like, I'm going with like bulleted lists because I like bulleted lists.
I think that works.
Well, what do we think are the follow-up steps, Benji? Trying to flesh out the info, like breaking it down so we have the info, highly destructive, and then the error message for when you can't complete the highly destructive behavior.
Yeah, and I guess the recommendations for what should be in the main part of modal or the confirmation page. And let's see, currently we have a mock-up. Christina, and you've, so this issue is technically just about coming up with the design. So refining this and refining the recommendations is really the scope of this issue. And then if we want to treat it as a separate issue, we could come up with the appropriate base class to implement this. Maybe we should also come up with a design for the error message. You can't do this operation as with deleting the content type, where presumably you wouldn't have the do it and the cancel button. You wouldn't have the confirmation box. Instead of the warning message, you'd have an error message.
And then bulleted list, it says to be able to complete this task, you would need to do the following tasks. Which I think for Node, it's like delete all the content related to the node.
Meaning content type?
Yeah, yeah. For content type, for deleting the article content type, you have to go through and delete all the individual articles. And
Right.
it'd be nice if it linked to where you need to go.
So you mean if you go to delete the content type, you couldn't actually do that, or
No.
That's right. That's the screenshot we were looking at.
Yeah.
Here.
Is use.
Okay. But what's the design that you need here? I mean, I don't think there's anything new more than placing the message and a standard message and some text with a link, no?
Yeah, and making it red. Yeah, I think that's it.
I mean, if you want, I can put that together, but I don't think that's a design per se. More kind of a wireframe, or I don't know how to say that. But if you need it, I can do that while we are talking.
Well, how do we propose this? Okay, if we make a recommendation, which was what the goal here is where does that live, and where do we, suggest that, how do we suggest people implement it? Like, do we create a page on Drupal.org? Is there a place for, UX patterns and say, this is the UX pattern for, I'm calling them delete confirmations. I mean, that's...
There is actually, I don't remember where, but there is actually a style guide, kind of something like that. I don't know who I was talking the other day with. Maybe it was with you. It was something about the admin UI, but there's actually a list of patterns. I don't know where. I can try to search for it, but I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Because I feel like we're close to where if we know where the destination is, and I know it exists too, Christina. I don't remember where it is or what it exactly looks like. So what's the appropriate? How do you describe the pattern to people that needs to be applied, to core and other contrib modules?
So I guess if we're creating a base class, then the API documentation for that class is one place to document it. And I guess somewhere in the guide for the form API.
Yeah, it's tricky. Like, that's one thing why I kind of was like, let me see what's going on in web form when I'm trying to do it, because there's lots of different delete confirmation classes, base class. Like, there's a confirmation base class, but when you go to delete a content entity versus a config entity, there's a different base delete form that has kind of different behaviors. And they're both, one of them, the content one is in the middle of being refactored. So it's hard to say we're going to be able to make a code recommendation. I guess that's my short answer, is it's hard to say there's going to be a code recommendation versus a visual recommendation. Because you could right now, anyone who wanted to go into their module could take those base classes and just, it's like adding a status message and moving a few of the elements around. Actually, you can get pretty close to the UI we're suggesting. Christina, can you help us in the ticket and see if you can find the follow-up to the style guide? I mean, I could search around for it. If that was in the ticket, maybe we could start drafting.
I just pasted a link. It's more a link to the user interface standards. It's not kind of page. It's more like about specific elements, but I think it makes sense, something like that, placing it there. And it talks about tours.
Mm-hmm.
It talks about interface text.
Yeah. No, I see it. Use when, example. I'm looking at select lists and the recommendations. Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm following you. So you mean you need to create that and me to help you to create that, or that you need where to place it?
I needed to know where to play. Like, I think the next is deciding where we're going to place it. And we could put something in that we have I have the ability to add a child page to this where we could, start a draft and say it's, under revisions and start fleshing it out.
Yeah. I don't know which of these places is the best one.
The user interface standards make sense to me. I mean, that's.
Yeah, I'm not sure what title we should give to that, but I don't know. Probably, yeah, confirmation. Yeah, I don't know, confirmation, workflows, or I don't know, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I use delete confirmation because that's the nature of highly destructive behaviors, or like delete being the most generic. I mean, of course, it's uninstall modules and oh god, the other not destructive, but the one that takes an incredibly long time is like re-indexing your node grants, and there's a few other batch processes that have a confirmation just because they're such a beast. I don't know, Benji, you wanted to should we just update the ticket with a few notes from our discussion and see what we can flesh out in the ticket?
I think so.
All right.
And I think this issue is just the design, so we'll want some follow-up issues for implementation and documentation. And if it can already be done with existing classes, then there's not a lot of urgency for providing extra base classes. Okay. And I guess the documentation is going to include the recommendations for what goes into the element, bulleted lists and details elements and so forth, collapsible field sets.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, we can draft it. I think if we draft the documentation, I should have some time the next week to do some draft of the documentation where everyone can just collaborate and we can just flesh out the recommendation and keep changing it. We're not, nothing's final.
That makes sense.
Until it's published.
Yeah, on Drupal.org, I think these pages are published, so we'll have to figure out what we feel, how we want to do it. I mean, I lean toward you putting it in place and at the top just saying this is a draft. This is, under review, because we don't really have any, draft section for content. You can just kind of mark it as a draft, say that it's under, people are still going to be able to see it.
Is that how we normally work, or do we discuss it on an issue until it has been drafted?
You tell me. I mean, I don't. I know change records have drafts, which is really nice, but yes. I don't see that on editorial content.
And things like coding standards. There's, excuse me, I think there's an issues queue for coding standards where they discuss things, and then when they agree on a new or changed coding standard, then they update the documentation pages.
All right, I'll then do it in a comment. Yeah, we can do it in comments. I guess the problem with comments is other people can't go in and edit it. That's the catch.
All right, I guess if you create a new documentation page but don't yet add it to the book, it's very unlikely that anyone will find it. It'll just be drupal.org/node/whatever. So I guess if we do that and say at the top that it's a draft, maybe original ideas is pretty workable.
I'll look into it. I don't know if you can create orphaned pages on Drupal.org. Of course, I think, of course, if you're a super user, you can create orphan pages. But I think as general users, you have to. I'll hack at it. I'll see. I don't think you can. That's what.
Well, you probably need to put it somewhere. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the user. We could add a sub guide to the user interface standards that's drafts. I mean, I bet you that's a workflow that some people have used, where you can add a subsection to you add a section. Yeah, you add subsections to sections.
Oh, you're right. Guide is a required field for documentation mode.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what my take was. You mark it incomplete, and then you put the warning message at the. You can inject a warning message at the top. I think we all have the ability to edit documents and create revisions on it. That's why it's useful. Benji, I'll start it out in the ticket.
Okay.
I'll summarize. Like if you can put the notes in from this, I'll try to find some time to summarize in the ticket, and maybe pick somewhere in core where we can start applying the wireframes.
I've just came up with a quick version of what you were saying for the error, or the action that cannot be done, and I'm not quite sure about the text that should be on the error itself. Did you already discuss that?
No, this is stuff we're trying to flesh out. I mean, the title shouldn't be, "Are you sure you want to delete the content type basic page?" It should be, what Benji, we're batting around, delete, content type, or delete basic page content type as the title with a question mark.
Okay.
In the error, what I found was saying this action can't be performed. Like I'm trying to provide an explanation and then generic text was kind of the route.
Yeah, not the best one for text.
Yeah, like this action can't be performed.
See it that way. Maybe it's better.
I mean, I feel like it should be generic text without the details. The basic page content type has content. Well, the basic page content. What's the text? Help me out here, guys. The basic page content type is currently being used on your website. You know what I mean? Like that's like. And I don't see anything wrong with then. That's why I put bold text. Like, what's the big thing? This action can't be completed is the most important thing. Someone I was bolding that because it's like saying the most important thing is not the error. It's the fact that they can't complete this action.
And do we want delete the basic page or just delete basic page?
I was going as short as possible. I was like. So I was going in this bullet list pattern, Christina, where you're working, and I mean, I need people to give an opinion on this. I'm like very matter of fact about this. Like you say, your page, is currently being used. This action cannot be completed. And then below it is a bulleted list. This action cannot be completed because, and then it lists out the simple things.
Okay.
Which in this case will be a list of just one item. You have to delete all the basic page content. And it would be useful if you could provide a link to the content page, admin/content, listing all of the basic page nodes.
I mean, it doesn't have to be a bullet list. The bullet list well, let's think about most actions that can't be completed have one remedy. It's like you have to go delete the relationships to it. It's this issue.
Do you have the number of the issue?
There's a link in the chat on the Hangout. Yeah.
Okay, just trying to see if you have.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So there's no such thing as a link that deletes all the basic page nodes. So I think that's the problem. It's misleading to make the word removed the link, but all of the basic page content, that could be a link to admin content with content type selected.
We're assuming that no one's mucked with their admin. I hate doing this, Benji. We're assuming that no one's mucked with their admin view that broke the link that we want to think that's going to work.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
But people usually have access to content. I mean, in which situation they don't? Is it a different permission? I'm not sure right now. I mean, is there a link that we are sure it's going to work always?
Always no, but
that's
you can link to what course applies. I have a site where I've been customizing the admin content page, and I've overridden the view, but that doesn't change the link. The link still works. Yeah. And both the URL or the path /admin/content and the route are unchanged. They still go to my customized view. And of course, it's Drupal. You can always override anything, but but I'm not particularly worried about that.
Okay, do you think it's fine if I just post that on the issue and then we can just come up with a solution later on, giving it some time to think about that?
Sure. If you post it as is, then I will post a comment saying, why not make this a link to admin content?
The one thing, this is like when I was doing the warning message, my takeaway from when I was playing with it was you want to, I feel like it's a two-part warning message. The warning message is this action won't happen, like what we have here, the basic page content type is currently being used. And then some generic, I was going with this generic string of bold text. Like for the warning, it was this action can't be undone. In this case, I feel like it's something like, and I was going with bold, this action can't be completed, period. So that it calls out the most immediate thing. Like they don't need to read anything else other than knowing that in red, in bold, this action can't be completed. No, I would keep both strings of text, Christina. That's what I was playing with when I was doing this. So you'd hit return and then put in bold. That was the pattern I came up with, but I'm not really, you put a return in, then this action can't be completed, and it's bold.
So I have one of Jacob's screenshots in my window.
And I'm not sure, should that be first? Should it be second? But I just found this notion, this generic thing that so you come here, you can't complete it, or that this action is highly destructive. It can't be undone.
I have the feeling that we were saying the same on the red message and on the text.
Yeah, I think the text should be, how do you remedy the problem? It should be rewritten, which, we could sort that out in the queue. We'll come up with that's why I like bullets, because you say basic page is used by 5 pieces of content. You need to delete the 5 pieces of content, 2 bullets with a link.
Here or the, okay.
No, in the basic, in the plain text.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah, I just like the bullet concept, but
But I mean, it doesn't have any sense here. I mean, you don't have several things to list. You just have to go and delete the content.
You have to read it and say. Oh, so let's leave this as is and put it in, and then we'll tweak the text if we need to.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay. I have to go. I have a hard stop. Are we going to be back on a normal schedule with daylight savings? Oh, it's 2 weeks from now. Right.
The US should change, and then the Europe stays the same as this week. So US will adjust to Europe next week. Yeah.
Thank you, George Bush. That was the only thing he accomplished in office. He changed time. It's true. It was his legislation. He changed. Okay. I got to go, guys. I'll talk to you next week. I'll throw some comments in the issue queue. Take care, all.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Gabor.
Bye.